This was 2:30 a.m. this morning. This is the future state of the motion picture industry.
$50-50 by 2020 to get women to get the bigger budgets as well.
It's very, very important that we put the stories in the hands of the people who own those stories.
Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Karina Rotenstein. I'm the TIFF Industry Conference producer, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. To begin, we'd like to acknowledge that today's event is taking place on the treaty territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work in the community. Today's session is part of the Dialogues program, and it is supported by Ontario Creates, and we would like to thank them for supporting this session and the industry conference. Just before we begin, just a few housekeeping notes. Just a reminder, there is no professional video photography allowed in the studio, but not to worry, we are live streaming this event. So, and these talks will be available on are available online on TIFF Talks channel on YouTube. So we're taking care of it for you. However, please do feel free to engage our socials. You have all our handles over there, and please use the hashtag TIFF19 to keep the conversation going. And we expect you to, especially with this session. Pan-Africanism in the Caribbean and Decolonizing the Screen is a conversation we are excited to host here at TIFF in Toronto, Canada, home to many generations of Caribbean audiences and storytellers. This session is co-programmed with Engage, and in particular, I'd like to thank programmer Temba Bebe for his collaboration in putting together this panel. So thank you, Temba. About Engage, since its inception at the Durban Film Mart in July, Engage has become an independent project of the South African organization STEPS, headed by Don Edkins. Engage hosts practitioner-driven conversations involving diverse range of industry stakeholders on the African screen sector, South-to-South collaborations, and diaspora film industries. The initiative is creating spaces in which knowledge is simultaneously shared and produced, therefore forming a continent diaspora-wide forum of consultation on the trends, developments, and the next steps of the Pan-African screen. This initiative was spearheaded by programmers Tiny Mungwe, Temba Bebe, Mitchell Harper, and Russell Longwane. And Engage will continue to take place at more festivals around the world. So now our esteemed guests over there are itching to get started, and it is really my pleasure to introduce each of them. First, directly right over there, the first one on the left, Sarah Ty Black. She's a filmmaker, arts curator, and writer living in Toronto. She's the programming coordinator of the Images Festival, former member of TIFF's festival programming team, and is one of the directors of the Royal Cinema, where she programs the monthly series called Black Gold. Welcome, Sarah Ty. Jason Fitzroy Jeffers is a Bajan filmmaker, writer, and producer. Currently the co-executive director of the Miami-based Caribbean filmmaking and arts collective, Third Horizon. Its annual Third Horizon Festival celebrates and empowers the new creatives emerging from the region. His award-winning short film, Papa Machete, which was set and filmed in Jacmel, Haiti, marked its world premiere here at TIFF in 2014 and has screened at over 30 film festivals around the world. Welcome, Jason. Renee Robinson is the Film Commissioner of Jamaica and a multilingual creative economy strategist and thought leader. She has 2 decades of management experience within the verticals of film, television, digital entertainment, and communications in Canada, Europe, South Africa, and the Caribbean. She's the former TIFF programmer of the Industry Conference, and she holds a master's in communication and culture with a specialization in management of telecom innovation from York University. Welcome, Renee. And our host for today is Claire Diao. She's a French and Burkinabe journalist and film critic. In 2015, she co-founded Awotélé, the Pan-African film periodical, and 2016 formed Sudu Connexion, the distribution company for films from Africa and the African diaspora. In 2017, her essay Double Wave, the New Life of French Cinema, won her the 2018 Beaumarchais Medal from the Société des auteurs et compositeurs dramatiques. Since 2018-19, Claire is one of the programmers of the selection committee at Directors Fortnight in Cannes. So this is a pretty heavy-duty, esteemed roster over here. And I'm going to hand it over to Claire to take it away. Thank you so much.
Thanks to everyone to be here. We're really honored to be together to have this discussion, especially because regarding all the A-list film festival internationally, maybe this one is the only one where we have an artistic director with a family coming from Barbados. But regarding the selection this year, I don't think there are so many Caribbean films. I don't know on your side, the one I've seen. We have one film from Eusanne Palsy, a filmmaker from Martinique, A Dry White Season, which is at TIFF Cinematheque. And in terms of location shooting, we have Zombie Child, directed by the French director Bertrand Bonello in Haiti. So it's really just a few regarding the amount of films that we have in this film festival and generally all year round in film festivals. So it's really interesting to have your different perspective on this question, because you run a film festival, you're working on investment funding, how to get money. You think a lot about decolonizing the screen. So this is the idea of this discussion. And as Karina said, we had this Engage at Durban Film Festival, which is a film festival in South Africa, created in 1979. So last July, we had this kind of meeting, panels, discussion, thinking about decolonization, thinking about how to work in the Global South, doing South-South co-production, and thinking also about documentary. But this time, Engage at TIFF focuses on the overlapping yet distinct notions of post-coloniality, Pan-Africanism, and the diaspora of the Caribbean, and how they can engage in and maintain a filming conversation with the African continent, but also with this international network that we're in. So maybe I will start with you, Jason, because in 2014, you set up this Third Horizon Film Festival in Miami. What gave you the idea to set up the festival, and what was the people reaction around you? Because if we have to make a link with the continent, I would think about a short film festival based in Madagascar called Rencontre du Film Court de Madagascar. When the director came and looked at funders saying, I want to set up a film festival, people were laughing at him saying, there are no filmmakers, so why will you make this festival?
Right. Well, one, thanks, Tiff, for having us. Yeah, you know, originally we started with making the short film Papa Machete, directed by Jonathan David Kane, which screened here in 2014. And as we were traveling with that film on the film festival circuit, we realized that we were encountering very few Caribbean filmmakers along the way, and we figured that, you know, that gave rise to so many questions. You know, is there other work out there that is really strong? And if so, why aren't we seeing it? But then similarly, if there is work out there and it's not that strong to make it to these festivals, why is that as well? And the thinking was that we needed a platform for that. So in collaboration with the Caribbean Film Academy in New York, we created the festival. And I have to say, like, right out of the gate, the response from funders and audience was very enthusiastic. There was a recognition of a very real need for it. Knight Foundation supported us from the very beginning, and you know, it's just grown. We've intentionally kept it pretty small. We like to keep it intimate, small lineup of about 10, 11 features, same amount of shorts, because the conversation around these films is what's particularly important to us. So programming in an intimate space with a program that we put a lot of thought into, just creates a great space for conversation.
Renee, I know we met many times in various film festivals. You're on the other side, like raising money and pushing and promoting all those filmmakers worldwide. So how is it to talk with all these people, to find money, to set up maybe a film fund in Jamaica?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Claire. So I think one of the things that's really interesting is that when you look at it from a film commission perspective, when I speak to colleague film commissioners, their main role is to attract location filming or to attract and to bring productions to come and shoot on their territory. But because of the space that we're in the Caribbean, Latin America, South as a whole, there's been a little bit of a shift in terms of let's start thinking about how do we create opportunities for our local filmmakers and creating space for them to be able to build up their ecosystem, to identify those opportunities and then to get into market. And so for the past few years, that's what we've been seeing happening in the Caribbean particularly, is this shift from, yes, of course, you can still come and shoot in Jamaica, but let's identify emerging talent. Let's put building blocks in place so that they have a path and a pipeline. So it's not a matter of, well, how do I do this? How do I go from point A to point B? And everybody's reinventing the wheel every single time, but that there's actually a path towards, if I want to be an internationally recognized filmmaker from the Caribbean, then these are some of the steps that I need to take. These are some of the labs that I need to be a part of. These are some of the film festivals that I need to apply to. These are some of the partnerships and the network that I need to build. So that has been happening a lot in the Caribbean, and it's been interesting because, as Jason said, you know, at the beginning, you kind of have to push and pull a little bit with the funding. You have to demonstrate your differentiators. You have to demonstrate that you are investment ready, commercially viable, because everybody's interested in the creative economy, but nobody wants to be the first person to lose their money. So, you know, everybody's saying, wait and see. You invest first, and then if you do well, then fine, maybe I'll get onto that bandwagon as well. But we kind of designed some very specific programs to break through that, which we actually are starting to see some of the benefits of that now.
So what is your budget, your year-round budget?
Oh God, I'm embarrassed. Embarrassed to tell you. But we are in the process of launching a film fund. So this is going to be a first for Jamaica. And this would be a fund that is related to the development of local content. So, you know, yes, available for international production, but the core goal and the philosophy behind it is that how do we identify public and private capital that is willing to put themselves into a vehicle that has a possibility for, as I said, investment-ready, commercially viable, local content to go through development, production, or marketing and distribution. So that's coming next year.
Wow, that's good. Congratulations.
Yes, and I'm very proud of that.
As you should be.
Saratai, that's another conversation, not talking about money, talking about images and what we see on screen. So you're not from the Caribbean, you're Afro-Brazilian, yes. But you select, you curate, you program. So do you receive a lot of films from the Caribbean? Do you see some storylines, some thematics?
Unfortunately, no. I think there's been a larger push in the past decade or so for queer stories from the Caribbean and documentaries, although often these are not helmed by like Caribbean directors. I find it's more, in terms of programming curation, it's really a searching out game, you know, trying to find that shared space that you're trying to share on a platform. So yeah, unfortunately, I don't see a lot of submissions from the Caribbean, but it's also, you know, when we're using these submissions database and we're working in these organizations, it's a problem from top to bottom, you know, that culture that surrounds an organization is also indicative of who's going to apply, who feels welcomed into a space to apply, like their work will be seen and understood. So, yeah.
And do you know many programmers, curators traveling to the Caribbean?
Some. There's some of us, some with the money.
I mean, looking for the content out of waiting for the content?
Yeah, it's a very isolating job because, you know, the higher up you get, there's less people who look like us and who are less interested in stories about people who look like us. But definitely there is an interest. I'm in such admiration of so many people like Temba or Natalia Hunter-Young who have really found their resources and made it a priority within their work to travel within Africa and the Caribbean to find these stories, because it is such a privilege, but it's also so deserved, you know.
Okay. Because we talk also about decolonization, it's also, let's talk about linguistic areas, because I know that between all these islands, some speak Spanish, some speak English, some speak French. So do you have bridges, like in your film festival?
Yeah, I mean, we see the festival itself as a bridge. Mm-hmm. In fact, I think the Caribbean itself is a bridge. If you think of it as, you know, well, we tend to think of it as this incredible pivot, you know, this crossroads in both time and history, where the old world became the new, between the East and the West. And so in programming the festival every year, we like to make sure that there's strong representation of all of the Caribbean, to the degree that we're able, because, you know, there isn't always work from all of the islands, but to the degree that we can. And not just across languages, but across gender, sexuality. I mean, I think that the interesting thing about the Caribbean is that it is so diverse, and it's so concentrated. So, you know, we think a lot naturally in just considering the Caribbean about intersectionality.
And do you see some island producing more than others? Do you receive more applications from
Yeah, I mean,
one or the other?
Yeah, you know, we receive a lot of applications, but we also do a lot of, you know, sleuthing ourselves, you know, traveling to other festivals, maintaining relationships with filmmakers. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of work coming out of Jamaica.
She won't hit you if you don't say that.
No, it's true. Trinidad, we've Haiti as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So we actually have a regional association of Caribbean film commissioners, and it's a loose body, but you know, basically we have a WhatsApp group, but you know, but we do meet once a year.
Culture is amazing.
Yeah. We meet once a year at the Trinidad and Tobago Film Festival and have this annual meeting where we're talking about what's happening in each of our countries, and the association has representation from the Spanish-speaking, Francophone, Anglophone, and the Dutch Caribbean as well. And we've seen some intersections starting to happen where, for example, we had Jamaican filmmakers attending festivals in Martinique and Guadeloupe. We actually had that, Flight, which you would know, One, and Sprinter One films in Martinique. And we've had as well delegations that are going to Trinidad, and the idea of the fact that in Martinique and Guadeloupe, they can access EU funding, for example. Trinidad has a tax incentive scheme, and then Dominican Republic has a water tank, you know, so there's all of these different resources that you're seeing that are happening all over the islands, but the fact that it's actually cheaper to fly to Germany than it is to go to, you know, another country in the Caribbean sometimes.
That's a big problem.
So, there's definitely this sporadic and just geographical and linguistic barriers that do occur that limit our ability to collaborate and that limit our ability to identify talent in each other's countries. But the spirit is there, I find, but we're still trying to work through it.
Will it be a reason of what you said about people coming, like island use as a location more than for local content? So you have more team coming from abroad than local team?
Yeah, I mean, that's changing now. But in Jamaica, so we have about 150 productions a year that come into Jamaica as international ones. And then from a local production perspective, the data is still a little bit anecdotal, but we definitely had, this year we had Sprinter, well last year we had Sprinter, which was a feature film by Storm Salto. We had Kia Moses' Flight. We have Kendall, that's under development right now, which is actually a period piece. I know when we were preparing, we were talking about period pieces in the Caribbean. So, I would say from sort of a large scale, we're averaging around maybe 1 to 3 features. A lot of shorts are starting to come out as well, so we'll be sending them to you guys. And people are actually starting to develop webisodes and web content. A lot of digital work is starting to happen. So there's a little bit of a refresh that's happening right now.
Okay. If you go back to facts and figures, people say that Caribbean is over 30 territories, total population of over 40 million. Many are living abroad, the Caribbean diaspora to be north of 20 million worldwide, with large concentration of the Caribbean diaspora found in Toronto, New York, Florida, the UK, France, Spain, and the Netherlands. Talking about diaspora, what can you tell?
I was at the Labor Day parade last week, and when I tell you just seeing the ocean of people on the Eastern Parkway, it's like, man, we are out there. We're everywhere. Anyway, sorry.
No. I'll jump to Sarah to ask the question. Talking again about decolonization, we thought that many fights regarding the African continent, many fights happen out of the continent, because, I don't know, perhaps being outside can bring something else, or I don't know. Do you think it's dynamic? Because we know about Caribbean Tales here in Canada. There are many initiatives. We thought about the Third Horizon Festival in Miami, and the Caribbean Film Academy as well in New York. So do you think there are more opportunities, and Jason will answer as well, outside of the Caribbean to promote and then maybe come back with more strength?
I think structurally, yes. I mean, all of these conversations about, seeking opportunity and space and backing we can't divest ourselves from the history of what has made that possible. So, it's this kind of strange lie we tell ourselves here in the global north, especially the higher up you go and the wider you go up in organizations, that we are helping. Any help that we extend is like the biggest gift. But I think what's also interesting to me is not just those co-partnerships that can make space for fantastic Caribbean works, but how can we here, with our privilege and our role in shaping global culture via like Western imperialism, how can we divest of some of that privilege and offer opportunity without putting our name on it, without claiming it as our own, without diluting the authenticity of it via, issues with translation, social space? I think there's a lot of, I always just think of who's on the receiving end, because when you look at all of the kind of major film organizations and industries and that kind of ecosystem, there's not a lot of people like us, in the organizations I move through. I'm often the only Black person, and there's that burden of representation, which is, I'm proud of representation, I'm proud to make space of it, but one Black person can't translate it all, It's emotionally unhealthy, and it stunts professional development, both for the individual and for the institution. So, yeah, when I think about these co-partnerships and who depends on who, I'm always wary of who's on the other side. Is it the right person? And if it is the right person, do they have enough supports, to provide the, space that filmmaker needs? It's not enough just to give money. It's, you have to treat these works of art with a care and respect that you might not be aware of because it's outside of your cultural sphere.
Jason?
Yeah, one of the things that we've been thinking a lot about, as we all do in film, is distribution. And it occurred to us, just in the last year or two, that we needed to create our own distribution. Actually, we haven't announced this, but Third Horizon has merged with Caribbean Film Academy in New York. We've been working together for 3 years now, 4 years actually, and we just realized that we were, more powerful together. So in addition to Third Horizon, the flagship Third Horizon Festival in Miami, and the screenings that CAFA does in New York, we've started to do regional festivals, smaller versions of the original Third Horizon Festival. So that's Temeri Film Festival in Guyana. We have some other ones coming online. We lent some support to Hairuna Film Festival in St. Vincent earlier this year. We're working on Playa Film Festival in Aruba. Because, I mean, I've been, are you familiar with the Chitlin Circuit? Mm-hmm. Chitlin Circuit in the South, many black musicians couldn't get into the larger, more established white venues, right? Mm-hmm. So we've kind of taken it upon ourselves, like, well, okay, we're going to create our own screening network. And I think, you know, it's an interesting experiment to determine, well, what does each location need? How can we lend support? It's not necessarily funding in every circumstance, but maybe it's relationships, resources. And so we're doing that within the Third Horizon Network, but I think that it's important for all of us as programmers of color in the African diaspora, and we're talking about Pan-Africanism. I think it's really important that we just share resources and our knowledge base and create this network, right? Think of it like spores, like mycelium, like mushrooms, you know?
Yeah, not only music and food.
I'll reel it back now. Yeah.
Renee, you've been to Durban.
Yeah.
So how do you feel? Do you think
well, actually,
African Film Festival welcome the Caribbean?
Yeah, and I think it's also, I mean, just to build on that, because it has really been important for us to have a market attendance strategy. And so the selection process into film festivals is important, but, you know, I think also just building presence and making sure that we are at the markets. And, you know, we've run into each other at a whole variety of markets now, Claire, and every time you see I'm there with like a big delegation of people because we need to be there. We need to physically be seen and we need to be present. And, you know, I think when we first started this market attendance strategy, you know, it was like you could see how, all right, well, yeah, the Film Commission is going to this market. Okay, yeah, I'll come. You know, I'll join. I'll be a part of this umbrella delegation that's going. And now, you know, 4 or 5 years later, we're starting to see a lot of our filmmakers are, you know, they're registering themselves, they're submitting their films, they're attending markets with or without the presence of a delegation. You know, they're all over the world right now. We were just in Durban, and I think that was an interesting one because Jamaica and South Africa actually have a cooperation treaty, and it's not really been activated because I think there's been a, you know, well, how do we do it kind of question happening. But the only way to break that down is to actually be there, is to actually, you know, make your presence felt and seen and known, and to be in the audience and to be in the crowd and to be at a table and to be in a meeting and to be in a boardroom and to start claiming that space, as you were saying, you know, and not waiting for someone to give it to you, but to actually just go there and start claiming your space because it's ours. We belong to it. It belongs to us. It's ours. There's no reason why we shouldn't be there. So. And I've noticed this over the past couple of years, just being at TIFF, I think, has a different dynamic around it because this is already such a multicultural environment. But, you know, when we are in markets in Europe or in Africa, Africa different, but, you know, just in markets where you're not normally seen and felt, then you really just have to get there and take it.
And so for sure you make contact during the market, but is there continuity or are just people nice to you because they meet you and
I
then
think
nothing
the continuity is there,
Okay.
But it is, I mean, everybody has their responsibility to conduct their follow-ups and that kind of thing. But the continuity exists because I think globally we're starting to recognize the power of Afrocentric content, which a few years ago didn't really happen. Like that started to shift now. And so, you know, I think we're realizing that it is more important than that. We do need to be able to collaborate in order to meet this growing market demand and to meet this opportunity that, you know, these doors and windows have just opened. And they weren't open before, they're open now. So we just have to step through them, and we have to make sure that we're prepared and that, you know, that we're as prepared as possible to take advantage of the opportunities that are opening all across the globe right now.
But there's always this question of being abroad, like to exist, to be seen, as you said, and then what you do locally. And I'm thinking about all the delegation you bring with you in film festival. Maybe it's a huge gap between what's happening in Jamaica and what's going outside. So do they have the impulse coming back from those film festival or film market to launch their own film market, or to be strong, like to broadcast the film on Jamaican TV, or maybe in all the planes flying really expensively throughout the Caribbean? Do we see, I mean, in every plane I enter, I watch the list to see if there are African films. And so many companies do not buy any content, so I wonder also.
Yeah, I think that's changing. It's changing very slowly, but it is changing. I think that curiosity is starting to happen. And, you know, I mean, we've seen a lot of different pop-ups that are happening across the region that never used to happen before. I mean, people popping up exhibition spaces or popping up theatrical, or, you know, for example, our national broadcaster has recently created a new, like a homegrown division where they're actually focusing on developing local content. So that is changing. One of those smaller community festivals launched their first time a film market this year, you know, and then the community festivals and the smaller festivals are actually starting to change. Trinidad is continuing with their film market as well. I know you had spoken about the Caribbean Film Mart too.
And there's the FEMI in Guadeloupe as well?
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, there's a lot that's changing, but I think it's changing because of exposure. You know, and it's changing because as the more exposed we become as a region about what's happening globally, is the better able we are to adapt what we're doing in the region.
Sarah, Jason, coming to Film Festival organization, do you feel a responsibility to continue your action not only during the festival but all year round? Do you organize like screenings, school screenings, I don't know, going to various places, or maybe making link with distributors?
Yeah, no, we have a very active year-round set of screenings. And not just in Miami, like I said, we're building out these networks. So in Miami, New York, we've recently started doing screenings in London. We're really thinking about, well, where are we? And we're everywhere, and so we want to respond to that. And also programming, you know, non-traditional cinema spaces, because I think you know, I love cinema culture, but I think that it can sometimes seem arcane to the average viewer. And so there's a need to kind of, if we're talking about decolonizing, it's then taking away some of that, you know, just bringing it to the people, you know. So for example, in my co-executive director, Romola Lucas, when she goes to Guyana to marry, doing screenings in prisons and schools and having dialogue there. That's really interesting to us, is taking the cinema out of the cinema. You know.
Sarah?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the most important element of my job is that element of community. I don't, you know, there are more identity-based festivals and like grassroots organizations that I'm really interested in. But in terms of larger festivals, there's kind of a point where that creative development stops for me, just because I know structurally the process of decolonizing is inherently impossible. You know what I mean? Like I want to do this work to be part of a Black cultural cooperative, or like Afro-diasporic, or Pan-African cultural cooperative not to engage in a Black identified form of capitalism. You know, I don't want to be Jay-Z running around cosplaying like Basquiat, like he's doing something. You know, y'all been on Twitter. You know, that's just, if, you know, and I think there's a lot of, we're talking about, when we talk about Black films, we talk about monetary success and visibility, but a lot of that is tied to capitalism, which is inherently colonial, inherently anti-Black, inherently the reason we are so disenfranchised to begin with. So it's like, you know, I will never ever fault someone for taking a chance on an institution that will help fund them, but it also, to me, like, that doesn't make my spirit feel good. You know, that's not the kind of cultural success that makes me feel like I've done something of value. You know what I mean? So I forgot the question. Sorry, I went on.
You're actually near on, of course.
Yeah,
Please,
you know, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think, you know, how we measure success, you know, couching this in decolonization, how we measure success has to change. And then also the power of cinema, I think, especially for the African diaspora, is that so many of our stories haven't been told. And I think that we have an incredible opportunity to empower each other through understanding each other. And so cinema within the African diaspora, I don't want to place more burden on Africa's children throughout the globe, but, you know, in sharing our stories with each other, we can deal with some of the trauma that we have, you know, that we walk with. You know, we can rebuild the connections where they were severed by the colonial powers. And so I think that our cinema, I'm not saying that we shouldn't, you know, make money with it. I'm not saying that, but I think it's really important that we think about, you know, how we build bridges to each other and empower ourselves through the images that we project to each other.
And like how, how visibility is coming about and what kind of visibility it is. Because, you know, I think of festivals like, and I'm sorry that all of my contextual references are to North America. I'm from Toronto. But, you know, when I think of a festival like Black Star in Philadelphia, it's a space for that active translation, and we all, minus the white people in this room, we all do that every day we wake up, we go to work, even if our job is not explicitly to handle any aspect of diversity or equity or representation. We do that work of translation to fit within the structures that we have to work within, that we haven't created for ourselves. So yeah, there's I feel like inherent difference between seeing representation in relief to the majority and seeing representation as the entire story. I was talking to Michael Greaz the other day, and he was talking about Blood Quantum and being able to make a film with almost majority Indigenous folks from the level of production all the way to the screen. And he said, it's sharing the same air, you know, and there's something that's just so freeing emotionally about that. And I think that when we think of where we're supposed to be, it should be that and not just accolades by the majority, if that makes sense.
Well, you had said, sorry, can I ask you a question?
Of course. This is a conversation.
Yeah, because earlier you had said, you were talking about a type of success that doesn't feel proper, what does a proper success feel like? What would that look like to you?
I mean, not to get all black and corny, although that is like my main thermometer. You know, when I think about my work, I think about just an actual small number of questions. How can I decenter whiteness? How can I recenter blackness in its various forms? How can I make communication go past myself? Because, you know, as I said, I'm often the first and last stop for Black representation in films in my work. And it's not fair to me, it's not fair to the filmmaker, you know. There should be a dialogue. There can't just be one person who now has the burden because organizationally we don't want to do the work. Can you repeat your question? I'm sorry.
Well, I was just
Once I do this, I'm out.
Now we will soon open the open question to the floor, but I wanted just to ask you, how do we build audiences? Because that's the main goal. If from childhood children are used to watch like American content, foreign, Western content, or let's say white content, how do you teach them? How do you build your audience? How do you let people be used to watch Caribbean films, African films, films from the diaspora and whatever? Because there's a question of spaces and the buyers and whatever, distribution, but there's also this, I mean, children are used to watch whatever they have on screen. They're not thinking like adults. So what can we do to have more film next year at TIFF and to have more films from the Caribbean for the children and for the next generation of audience?
I mean, I think, yeah, again, as I was saying a little bit earlier, to expand on that, taking cinema beyond the cinema. I was working on a production 2 years ago in Antigua, and I remember passing by the market every day and seeing people standing around a video stall. You know, every day there was it was like a corner cinema, you know. Caribbean Film Academy, in its inception, was screening films in a variety store in Brooklyn. You know, can we get films on our minivans in the Caribbean? Like, you know, how creative can we get with this? You know, I think we have to bring it to the people. You know?
One of the things that I've been noticing as a trend is just the shifting in the animation industry as well. And that has an indirect manner of building out audiences, because particularly with young people, because all of a sudden there's merchandise around animated content, which, you know, you start seeing kids from, regardless, doesn't matter what sociocultural background they're coming from, but they just love that stuffed animal, or they just love that lunchbox, or they just love that, you know, like that particular, that character. And, you know, I think using animation can be a way as well, because we actually, it has a possibility of breaking down a wall that maybe we're still fighting with live action, you know, just that possibility of looking at another person and seeing yourself in them. I think the animation space has been able to shift through that somehow. So that's an opportunity.
Sarah?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot over the past year or so, like having been doing this for several years now, we have more than proven ourselves. You know, I think at this point the work can no longer be ours, which is not to say we're not still undertaking it with care and respect. But, you know, you mentioned the Chitlin circuit. There's been generations before us for decades, since, you know, the beginning of cinema, who have been advocating just as we're advocating today, and nothing has changed. And that's not for any lack of value or power of our words. It's, you know, you can knock on a door for as long as you want. Doesn't mean the door is going to open. So I really think it's, you know, up to those who hold the institutional and structural and market power to really do the work. You know, it's not our jobs to make up for a lack. You know, that is how we inherently exist as colonized people, as an erasure. And so we're constantly trying to reassert ourselves. But there is a point at which, if you think this work, which it is important, which it is obviously, you have to do that work. You know, everyone that I know who works in programming or curation or any really sort of thing related to the arts and media in North America who is Black is exhausted. We're tired, you know. How much louder do we have to scream? How, like, the people before us have been screaming. There's a point at which, you know, you have to maintain your energy, you know, which is not to say like, oh, we don't have to do the work. It's, you know, this has been proven time and time again that it doesn't matter how loud we shout, that there's a point at which people are just so shamelessly disinterested in changing things, who have the power to do that.
So let's take the audience energy. Do you have questions or comments? We'll take 1, 2, or 3 maximum questions. Depend of the length of your question.
In regards to, you were speaking a little bit about broadcaster and how they were now only putting money into, you know, local content, that kind of thing. I mean, we're ushering into a digital world are we seeing, tech startups coming up that are going to invest in, the web series, the short films, moving into features, moving into TV shows, all that sort of stuff in the Caribbean landscape right now? I don't know.
I'm seeing it in the Caribbean. There's actually a large movement from venture capital space and both public-private opportunities. So actually, I'm seeing quite a bit of that. In fact, recently, this real-life story, one of the films that we supported that went through our development program, Flight, which I'd mentioned it earlier, they've been invited to pitch to different groups of venture capitalists and to different groups of investors who, for years, we would put projects in front of investors and again, they'd say, great, no problem, but I don't want to be the first one. And now we're actually seeing that these types of financiers are actually outreaching to the creative persons themselves to invite them into their angel networks or to invite them into their angel spaces. We do have some angel networks in the Caribbean, and I'm really happy to say that I've actually seen a couple of media companies that their CEOs are a part of these angel networks. So it's changing.
Another question?
Hi, I'm a filmmaker and I'm an educator as well, and I'm interested in developing new voices, and I'm wondering if just the idea of development of voices through institutions, and academies, like whether it's Sundance or CFC or even, Cuba's done it well with Decaic, is that a form of that training, that rigorous training, is there a better way that's maybe not a form of colonization? I don't know.
I think as we see more festivals and more, I will say this, Third Horizon, for example, we started as a film collective. Everybody who works on the festival is a filmmaker themselves. And I think, pardon? I'm not. No, I meant at our festival, at Third Horizon, all of us are filmmakers. And I think that as we build this community, if we can just create more spaces to commune, I think, and work on each other's projects. I think so many great film movements have started out of community. And I think part of the challenge of us being a group of small islands and nations that is then splintered into this large diaspora, that we don't have as many opportunities to just gather and exchange information as would be helpful to develop talent. To, here, let me just show you the script I have, or I like what you did there, are you interested in lighting this? So I think that if it may seem like such a small thing, but I think as we develop that community more, we will see a strengthening of talent. Not to say that our filmmakers shouldn't be going to incubators or shouldn't be going to film school. I'm definitely not saying not, but I think we definitely need more community, need more, Caribbean Film Summer Camp, I don't know.
I think the incubators are key. They have to be, because not only does it take you through a process of understanding what your gift is to the world and what your viability to the world is, but it also creates an alumni who then have the opportunity to return, to mentor, to work with others, to help to groom, help to expose talent, to show other filmmakers, this is the path that I took, and this path exists. So I think it's really, really crucial.
Yeah, I think it's really... Can I answer? Yes. I think it's really dependent on the context, both just like personal and where you're going. I think especially in like a global north context, when we're thinking about what development and success looks like, it's very much tied to the institutions. Most of us on the stage, I'm sure, or maybe not Claire, I can only speak for North America, let's make that clear. I'm a really staunch believer in the fact that we get to where we are through a combination of hard work and privilege, and part of that privilege is institutional affiliation. So, if you were to ask me that question directly, I would say, yes, going to like a top school in the country for my bachelor's and my master's. Yes, that helped. Yes, having like institutional affiliations with places like TIFF, of course that has helped. But along the way, it's been quite isolating. You know, it's not to bring it back to that idea of being free again, but you know, I'm really, as you can probably tell, fighting that urge to seek an imbalance of development at the expense of well-being. You know, and of course that's going to change wherever you are. You know, Durban sounds amazing. It sounds like Mecca. I want to go, but you know, there's a cost for that attainment.
One last question. Yeah.
The four of you have been instrumental in reimagining a whole bunch of different things in the industry. I'm actually really been tracking with you, Renee, on what you created in Jamaica, which is really cool. And I'm just wondering right now, what are you dreaming about? What's on your next in your world?
That's a good final question.
You know, I remember the year that we were here with Papa Machete, there was Chris Rock's film Top 5 was premiering here at the same time. And there was a recurring joke in that film about his character wanting to make a film about the Haitian Revolution. And it was a joke, oh, they'll never let you make that film. I dream of dozens of films about the Haitian Revolution. Cartoons and TV shows and, you know, you know, you were talking about like hierarchy, right? Like we think so much about breaking through that we often tend to come back to this idea of singular successes. And I've been trying to think more, third horizon, duh. I mean, horizontally, laterally, you know, all of us just like rushing the door. Just more films. Just more films that you know, that also reimagine how we think about the Caribbean. You know, we don't have a lot of time. I could come see me afterwards.
Shireen, was that you? Oh, hi. I actually dream of the day when the institutions that Sarah Tai spoke about, the ones that are the stepping stone and the ones that we feel that create privilege and that you have to pass through these institutions in order to receive and attain this privilege. I dream of the day when that institutional structure is something that we own. It's not something that we have to go to and learn from. It's ours. We own these institutions. We are leading these institutions. We are designing the path of these institutions because these institutions are led by us. That's the day that I dream of.
Sarah?
That was my answer.
You go, girl!
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I was just like over here having a moment. Yeah, I dream of that too. But no, I dream of financial autonomy. I dream of financial stability. I dream of creative autonomy. And I dream of a place where we don't have to do the work of translating our experience.
That's a beautiful dream. So please follow them, Sarah Tai Black, Renee Robinson, Jason Fitzroy Jeffers, and we do have also in the TIFF Bell Light Shop this magazine that we run independently on the occasion of the 3 major African film festivals. Carthage International Film Festival in Tunisia, created in 1966. They will open a new diaspora section for the upcoming edition that will be between October 26th and November 2nd, and there will be an Engage at GCC panel discussion. The FESPACO, Pan-African Film Festival of Ouagadougou in Burkina Faso, which happens every 2 years in Burkina Faso, in Ouagadougou, and where since the 1980s they run Paul Robeson Awards. So they receive a lot of filmmakers from the diaspora, coming from Arnold Antonin from Haiti to others like Franck Salin from Guadeloupe, Laurent Pantaleon from Reunion Island, so mostly from Francophone Caribbeans, but they're still open to the diaspora. And then you have the Durban International Film Festival in South Africa, created in 1979, that is now in a strong link with Caribbean Tales. And so every year they are inviting them and making workshops with especially women filmmakers during the Durban Film Art. So thank you to all of you for coming. Go and watch all the Caribbean films that you see in the festival, you see out of the festival. Support these fantastic guys, and let's stay in touch. Thank you.
And I think if our guests are available to speak with people in the industry lounge, they will come join you after they take their mics off and get detect. But thank you so much to our esteemed guests. Thank you to all of you coming. At 4:15, we have a session about privacy and data with really some awesome leading experts right now happening in conference room B, starting in soon, so get a coffee and go there. Or you can come back here for 4:30 about international co-financing. Got lots of options. All right, thank you.